The Arizona Territory stretched endlessly under the scorching sun, its red dust coating everything in sight. In the saloons of Tombstone and the trading post of Tucson, men spoke in hushed tones about her. The Apache queen they called Ayana, meaning eternal blossom in her native tongue, though no cowboy who'd encountered her lived to appreciate the irony. 12 cowboys this month alone, muttered Jake Morrison, spitting tobacco juice into the spittoon beside his chair at Murphy's saloon. The weathered rancher's hands trembled slightly as he lifted his whiskey glass, found 'em scattered across the desert like tumbleweeds. Not a bullet wound on 'em. She don't even give 'em the dignity of a quick death. Around the scarred wooden table, other men nodded grimly. The Apache raids had intensified over the past year, but these weren't random attacks. They were calculated, strategic strikes led by a woman whose intelligence matched her ruthlessness. Ayana had united 3 previously warring Apache bands under her leadership, something no chief had accomplished in decades. "My brother-in-law saw her once," whispered Tom Bradley, a young cattle driver whose face had aged years in recent months. "Said she rode a black stallion, tall as a man, with eyes that could freeze your blood. Wore a necklace made from the bullets of dead soldiers." The saloon fell silent, except for the rhythmic creak of the ceiling fan fighting against the desert heat. Outside, the town of Willow Creek went about its evening routine. Children called in for supper, shopkeepers closing their stores, and the distant lowing of cattle settling for the night. But everyone knew the peaceful facade was fragile. Meanwhile, 15 miles east in the Dragoon Mountains, Ayana sat cross-legged in her tent, studying a hand-drawn map by flickering firelight. At 28, she commanded respect through a combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering resolve. Her long black hair was braided with eagle feathers, earned through acts of courage, and her weathered hands bore the calluses of someone who'd fought for every inch of her territory. "The supply wagons will pass through Devil's Canyon tomorrow at dawn," reported Nalnish, her most trusted warrior. His scarred face reflected the dancing flames as he pointed to a narrow passage on the map. 20 soldiers, maybe more. Ayana traced the route with her finger, her dark eyes calculating distances and timing. "Too many witnesses. We take their supplies, but we let them live to carry our message. This land belongs to the Apache, and those who respect our boundaries will find safe passage." Her strategy had evolved over the years. Unlike the brutal raids of the past, she preferred psychological warfare. Let the cowboys and settlers fear the legend more than the reality. Fear kept them away from sacred Apache hunting grounds better than any army could. As the war council dispersed, Ayana stepped outside her tent into the cool mountain air. The stars above seemed close enough to touch, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled its lonely song. She thought of her younger brother, killed by soldiers 3 winters ago, and her husband, lost to smallpox brought by settlers. The weight of leadership sat heavily on her shoulders, but she'd learned to carry it without showing weakness. What she didn't know was that 50 miles south, a different kind of story was beginning to unfold. Lucy Henderson pressed her thin body against the cold stone wall of the abandoned mine shaft, her stomach cramping with hunger. At 14, she'd been on her own for 6 months since her adoptive parents died of fever, leaving her with nothing but the threadbare clothes on her back and a rusted locket containing a faded photograph of people she couldn't remember. The desert was unforgiving to a young girl traveling alone. She'd survived by scavenging in ghost towns, drinking from muddy waterholes, and occasionally receiving reluctant charity from sympathetic travelers. Her blonde hair had grown long and tangled, and her once blue dress was now the color of dust. "Please, mister, just a piece of bread," she'd begged at the last trading post, but the store owner had shooed her away like a stray dog. "We got enough problems without feeding every vagrant that wanders through." Now, as night fell over the Chiricahua Mountains, Lucy wondered if she'd finally reached the end of her strength. The morning sun had been brutal, and she'd finished the last of her water hours ago. In the distance, she could see the faint glow of a campfire and smell the enticing aroma of cooking meat. Desperation overcame caution as she crept closer through the scrub brush and scattered boulders. Her bare feet, tough from months of walking, made no sound on the rocky ground. As the camp came into view, her heart nearly stopped. Apache warriors sat around the fire, their faces painted for war, their weapons within easy reach. She'd heard enough stories to know she should run, but her legs felt like water. One of the men looked up, his keen eyes scanning the darkness. "Someone watches us," he said in accented English, rising to his feet with fluid grace. Within seconds, strong hands grabbed Lucy from behind. She was too weak to struggle as they dragged her into the firelight, her small frame dwarfed by the circle of warriors surrounding her. Their faces showed no emotion as they examined the strange white child who'd wandered into their domain. "What do we do with her?" asked one of the younger men. The leader, Nalnish, studied Lucy's face for a long moment. She was clearly not a threat, just a lost, starving child. But their location was secret, and she'd seen too much. "Take her to Ayana," he decided finally. "The queen will know what to do." As they lifted her onto a horse, Lucy's last conscious thought was that she'd finally reached the end of her journey. The legendary Apache queen would surely be her death. But sometimes the universe has different plans than the ones written in legends and fear. Dawn was breaking over the Apache camp when Lucy slowly regained consciousness. Her first sensation was warmth, a luxury she hadn't experienced in months. She lay on a pile of soft buffalo hides inside a spacious tent, and the air smelled of sage smoke and leather. As her vision cleared, she found herself face to face with the most striking woman she'd ever seen. Ayana sat perfectly still, just 3 feet away, her intelligent dark eyes studying Lucy with the intensity of a hawk observing potential prey. The Apache Queen's reputation had painted her as a monster, but the woman before Lucy was undeniably human. Beautiful, yes, but marked by the same kind of deep weariness that Lucy recognized in her own reflection. "You speak English?" Ayana asked, her voice softer than Lucy had expected, but carrying unmistakable authority. Lucy nodded, too frightened to trust her voice. She noticed details that the saloon stories had never mentioned. The queen's hands were stained with plant dyes from healing herbs, and her leather clothing bore intricate beadwork that spoke of patience and artistry rather than savagery. "What is your name, child?" "Lucy Henderson, ma'am." The words came out as barely more than a whisper. Ayana leaned forward slightly, and Lucy caught a glimpse of something unexpected in those fierce eyes, curiosity mixed with what might have been recognition. "Henderson, your parents?" "Dead. Both of them. Fever took them last winter." Lucy's voice grew steadier as she spoke about familiar pain. "They weren't my real parents anyway. Just kind people who took me in when I was small." The Apache Queen was quiet for a long moment, and Lucy noticed her fingers unconsciously tracing a small scar on her left wrist. "You have been wandering alone?" "Yes, ma'am. 6 months now. I don't have anywhere else to go." Ayana rose gracefully to her feet and moved to a wooden chest in the corner of the tent. When she returned, she carried a bowl of warm stew and a cup of water. "Eat slowly," she instructed, setting the food before Lucy. "Your stomach will rebel if you consume too quickly." As Lucy ate, Ayana watched her with growing fascination. The child showed none of the hatred or fear she'd expected from a white settler's daughter. Instead, there was a profound loneliness that Ayana recognized all too well, the hollow emptiness of someone who'd lost everything and found herself utterly alone in an hostile world. "The warriors want to know what I plan to do with you," Ayana said finally. "They believe you pose a risk to our safety." Lucy's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Will you kill me?" The question hung in the air between them like smoke. Ayana had ordered the deaths of many enemies, soldiers, cattle rustlers, men who'd threatened her people's survival. It should have been simple to give the same order now. But looking at this fragile child, She found herself remembering another lost girl from many years ago. "Tell me, Lucy Henderson," Ayanna said instead, "what do you see when you look at me?" Lucy considered the question seriously, studying the Apache Queen's face with the same intensity she was receiving. "I see someone who's tired," she said finally. "Someone who's had to make hard choices and doesn't like making them. Someone who's lost people she cared about." The accuracy of the observation struck Ayanna like a physical blow. In all her years of leadership, no one, not her warriors, not her enemies, not even her closest advisors, had seen past the legend to the woman beneath. This starving orphan girl had looked into her soul and recognized her pain within minutes of meeting her. "You are not wrong," Ayanna admitted quietly, "but that does not solve our problem. You have seen our camp, our faces. If you leave, you could lead soldiers here." "I won't," Lucy said with surprising firmness. "I swear on my parents' graves, I won't tell anyone where you are. I don't even know where I am myself." Ayanna stood and walked to the tent's entrance, pulling back the hide flap to look out at her warriors preparing for the day. Several of them glanced toward her tent, clearly waiting for her decision about the white child. Leadership meant making choices that others couldn't make, carrying burdens that others couldn't bear. But this choice felt different somehow. "There is another problem," she said, not turning around. "Even if I trust your word, my people will not. They have suffered too much at the hands of your kind to believe in the promise of one child." Lucy set down her empty bowl and struggled to her feet, swaying slightly from weakness and exhaustion. "Then I'll stay," she said simply. "If leaving puts you in danger and staying puts you in danger, I might as well stay. At least here I have food and shelter." The unexpected logic of the statement made Ayanna turn around. "You would choose to remain prisoner among people you've been taught to fear." "I've been afraid every day for 6 months," Lucy replied. "Afraid of starving, afraid of wild animals, afraid of the men in towns who look at me like I'm something they can use. At least your kind of danger comes with breakfast." Despite herself, Ayanna felt the corner of her mouth twitch in what might have been amusement. This child had a resilience that reminded her of Apache youth, the ability to find pragmatic solutions to impossible situations. "If you stay, you work," Ayanna said finally. "Apache children contribute to the survival of the tribe. You will not be treated as a guest." "Yes, ma'am, I can cook some, and I'm good with horses. My adoptive pa, taught me before he got sick." Ayanna nodded slowly. It was a temporary solution at best, but something about this strange, fearless child intrigued her. Perhaps it was the loneliness she recognized, or perhaps it was simple curiosity about what kind of person could see past legend to truth so easily. "Very well. But understand this, Lucy Henderson, one betrayal, one attempt to escape and bring soldiers to us, and mercy will not find you a second time." "I understand," Lucy said, and Ayanna believed she truly did. As word spread through the camp that the white child would be staying, reactions ranged from confusion to outright anger. Nalnish approached Ayanna's tent that evening, his weathered face creased with concern. "My queen, the warriors question your judgment in this matter. A white child among us—" "The warriors are free to question," Ayanna interrupted, "but the decision is made. The child stays until I determine otherwise." That night, Lucy lay on her buffalo hides listening to the sounds of the Apache camp, the low murmur of conversations around dying fires, the distant call of a night bird, the gentle nickering of horses. For the first time in months, she felt something approaching safety. In her own section of the tent, separated by a hanging blanket, Ayanna stared at the ceiling and wondered what impulse had stayed her hand. She'd built her reputation on decisive action and unwavering strength. Showing mercy to a white child could be seen as weakness, and weakness in a leader meant death for her people. But when she closed her eyes, she saw Lucy's face. Not the fear she'd expected, but recognition. The child had looked at her and seen not a monster, but another human being carrying too much pain. In a world that had forgotten her humanity, that simple recognition felt like water in the desert. Neither of them slept easily that first night, but for the first time in years, neither of them slept entirely alone. 3 weeks passed before anyone in the nearby settlements noticed that the Apache raids had stopped entirely. The supply wagons that had been traveling in armed convoys began moving with single-guard details. Cowboys who'd been traveling in groups started riding alone again. The legend of the fierce Apache queen remained, but the terror that had accompanied it began to fade into puzzled relief. Inside the Apache camp, a different kind of transformation was taking place. Lucy had proven her worth quickly. Her natural way with horses had impressed even the most skeptical warriors, and her willingness to take on the camp's most unpleasant tasks, cleaning cooking pots, tending the fire through the night, mending torn clothing, had earned grudging respect. More importantly, her presence had begun to change Ayana in ways that surprised everyone, including the queen herself. "She laughs," Nalnish observed to his wife one evening, watching Ayana smile at something Lucy had said while they worked together preparing evening meal. "I have not heard our queen laugh in 3 summers." It was true. Lucy's quiet observations about camp life, delivered with the unfiltered honesty of youth, had a way of finding humor in everyday situations that Ayana had forgotten existed. When a particularly proud warrior slipped and fell into the creek while trying to impress a young woman, Lucy's whispered comment, "Well, at least now she knows he's brave enough to fight the water," had reduced Ayana to silent giggles, but the changes ran deeper than humor. Lucy's presence had awakened something in Ayana that she'd thought was lost forever, the memory of what it felt like to protect someone out of love rather than duty. The child never asked about her past or pressed for information about Apache customs. Instead, she simply observed and adapted, showing the same survival instincts that had kept her alive during months of wandering. She learned to identify edible plants, to read weather signs, to move silently through the brush. More importantly, she learned to read the moods and needs of the people around her. When old grandfather Taza's arthritis flared during a cold snap, Lucy appeared at his side with heated stones wrapped in soft leather without being asked. When the camp's newest mother struggled with a crying baby that wouldn't sleep, Lucy volunteered for night watch duties so the exhausted woman could rest. "The white child has Apache heart," declared Grandmother Desba, the camp's eldest woman and a person whose approval was not easily earned. "She thinks of the tribe before herself." Ayana found herself increasingly protective of Lucy, and the intensity of that feeling both surprised and concerned her. She'd sworn never again to let herself care too deeply for anyone. Caring meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant weakness that enemies could exploit. But watching Lucy integrate into camp life with such determination and grace had awakened maternal instincts she'd thought were buried forever. The crisis came on a blazing afternoon in late July. A dust cloud on the horizon announced approaching riders, and the lookouts quickly identified them as cavalry, a full patrol, heavily armed, riding directly toward the hidden canyon that protected the Apache camp. "They know we're here," Nalnish reported grimly as the warriors gathered around Ayana's tent. "Someone has guided them to us." All eyes turned to Lucy, who sat frozen beside the cooking fire, where she'd been helping prepare the midday meal. The accusation hung in the air without anyone needing to voice it. She was the only person who could have betrayed their location. "I didn't," Lucy whispered, her face pale with shock and fear. "I swear on my parents' graves, I never told anyone anything. I don't even know how to get back to the towns from here." Ayana studied the child's face, reading the genuine panic and confusion there. Her instincts told her Lucy was telling the truth, but the evidence seemed damning. The cavalry was less than 2 miles away, and there was no time for lengthy investigations. "Take her to the holding area," Ayana commanded, her voice resuming the cold authority that had been missing for weeks. "We'll deal with this after we survive." As two warriors moved to grab Lucy's arms, the child looked directly at Ayana, with tears streaming down her face. "I didn't betray you," she said simply. "I couldn't. You're all I have." The words hit Ayana like a physical blow, but she couldn't afford emotion now. Her people's survival depended on clear thinking and decisive action. She turned away as Lucy was led off, focusing instead on the tactical problem of evading a cavalry patrol in broad daylight. The Apache were masters of desert warfare, and within minutes the camp was transformed. Tents were struck, supplies packed, and horses prepared for rapid movement. The entire community melted into the landscape like ghosts, following ancient trails known only to their people. But as they rode, Ayana found herself thinking not about the soldiers behind them or the safe haven ahead, but about the look of utter heartbreak on Lucy's face. The child had called them "all I have," and the simple statement carried a weight that pressed down on Ayana's chest like stone. They reached safety in a hidden box canyon as the sun set, the cavalry patrol having lost their trail hours earlier. As the warriors began setting up a temporary camp, Ayana made her way to where Lucy sat under guard, still bound, but no longer crying. "How did they find us?" Ayana asked without preamble. Lucy looked up at her with hollow eyes. "I don't know. Maybe they followed my tracks from weeks ago? I wandered through a lot of country before your warriors found me. Or maybe someone else saw your smoke, or your horses. I truly don't know. But I didn't guide them there." Ayana crouched down so they were at eye level. "If you had wanted to escape, you could have done so many times in the past 3 weeks. Why would you choose today to betray us?" "I wouldn't choose any day to betray you," Lucy said quietly. "You gave me life when you could have given me death. You shared your food when I was starving, your shelter when I was cold. More than that, you treated me like I mattered. I haven't felt like I mattered to anyone since my parents died." The simple honesty in Lucy's voice carried more conviction than any elaborate oath could have managed. Ayana realized that her first instinct had been correct. This child was incapable of the kind of calculated betrayal that would have been required to guide cavalry to their camp. "Nalnish," she called to her lieutenant, "send scouts back to our old camp, search for signs of how the soldiers found us." 2 hours later, the scouts returned with their report. Bootprints near the eastern approach showed that a lone cavalry scout had discovered their location days earlier, probably while tracking a different group entirely. He'd marked their position and returned with the patrol, but the delay had given the Apache time to escape. "It was not the child," Nalnish admitted, though his voice still carried reservations. "But the question remains, what do we do with her now? Keeping a white girl with us grows more dangerous as word spreads that we have her." Ayana looked at Lucy, who was listening to the conversation with the resigned expression of someone who'd learned to expect disappointment. The practical choice was obvious: release the child near a settlement and let her make her own way in the world. It would be safer for everyone. But looking at Lucy's face, Ayana saw herself at 14, lost, alone, carrying grief too heavy for such young shoulders. She remembered the loneliness of those early days after her family's death, the desperate hunger for connection with another human being who might understand her pain. "She stays," Ayana declared firmly. "Any who question this decision may address their concerns to me directly." The relief that flooded Lucy's features was so intense, it was almost painful to witness. "Thank you," she whispered. "I won't make you regret it." "You will earn your place here through service to the tribe," Ayana continued, "but you will no longer be treated as prisoner. From this day forward, you are under my personal protection." That night, as the camp settled into watchful rest, Ayana and Lucy sat together beside a small fire, sharing a meal of dried meat and wild onions. The conversation was comfortable, filled with small observations about desert life and gentle questions about each other's past. "Why did you really let me stay?" Lucy asked finally. "It would have been easier to leave me at the settlement." Ayana considered the question seriously before answering. Because, she said finally, loneliness is a poison that kills slowly. I have carried that poison for many years. When I look at you, I see someone who understands its weight. Lucy nodded, poking at the fire with a stick. My adoptive ma used to say that God puts people in our path when we need them most. I never believed it before, but maybe she was right. Perhaps, Ayana agreed. Or perhaps we simply choose to see meaning in coincidence because the alternative is too empty to bear. Either way, both of them slept better that night than they had in years. As word spread through the territory that the Apache queen had taken a white child under her protection, the legends began to change. Stories of ruthless savagery gave way to tales of unexpected mercy. Cowboys still gave the Apache lands a respectful birth, but fear was gradually replaced by curiosity about the woman who could show both fierce strength and tender compassion. In the months that followed, Lucy would grow from a lost orphan into a bridge between two worlds, learning Apache ways while helping her adoptive people understand that not all white settlers were enemies. Her presence in Ayana's camp would eventually lead to the first peaceful negotiations between the Apache and local authorities in over a decade. But that night, as the fire burned low and the desert stars wheeled overhead, neither of them thought about legends or politics or the future. They simply sat together, two souls who had found in each other the answer to the oldest question in the human heart. The question of whether anyone else in the world might truly understand the weight of what they carried. The fierce Apache queen and the shy orphan girl had rewritten the ending of their stories. Instead of tragedy, they had chosen family. Instead of isolation, they had chosen connection. And in doing so, they had proved that sometimes the most powerful act of rebellion is simply refusing to be alone.